How's it going, everybody? This is the Keep It Kayfabe Podcast, where we talk about MMA and wrestling news. This is my friend Matt here today with us.
Hello, everybody.
He's here again, and let's get right into it today. We have some Bray Wyatt news. We have a brief Raw review. We have some fights to announce. We have some Rampage Jackson news, and we have some very sad MMA news here. We also have the death of Ryan Jimmo. This is the sixth passing of an MMA fighter in the first half of 2016. Jimmo was killed in a hit-and-run in Edmonton. The police have since released images of the suspect's vehicle. Apparently, Jimmo and another man got in an altercation, and the man got in his car, and then as Jimmo walked away, he ran Jimmo down and then fled. There's no new news on that yet, but I'll report it as it comes along. Up next, we have the news that Bray Wyatt has been replaced on the Japanese tour with Chris Jericho. Wyatt was scheduled to face Shinsuke Nakamura, who's by far the biggest wrestler in Japan today. This leads me to believe that Bray Wyatt is injured, because if he wasn't, he would probably be working with Nakamura, because there's no one else he could get more rub from right now than Nakamura. This is the third or fourth month now that Wyatt has been hurt. He's actually been hurt dating back to the middle of last year. He came back, he had a match, and then he got hurt, and he's been out since. Right now, he's in a tag team feud with his faction and the New Day. And, that tells me he's nursing some kind of injury, so I hope he's okay. But we'll stay tuned on that. The Raw review will be coming up at the end of the show. Not much happened last night, but some storylines progressed. We'll talk about that. Very few storylines progressed, mind you.
So I do think the current feud that Wyatt is in is going to be interesting. I like the direction they're going with Xavier Woods possibly being some kind of brainwashed or something. He seems to be playing the part really well, too. As you were saying, it seems like Wyatt himself is injured. That's why he would be involved in a tag team feud like this. It doesn't really seem to fit what he would normally be doing if he was in top condition, but hopefully that ends soon and we can get back to some great Wyatt singles competition.
Yeah, dating back to last year's whatever WrestleMania he fought Taker at, ever since then he's been hurt on and off. He hasn't had a consistent feud, and if he has had a feud, he hasn't gone over it all in these feuds. I know Vince McMahon's really high on him, and he doesn't really count wins and losses too highly, and he thinks Wyatt can survive this, but you gotta think sometime soon here Wyatt has to get a meaningful win in a feud. Do you think it's going to be against New Day?
I mean, I think it could be against New Day, but I don't know if that's the meaning that he necessarily needs. I think he needs a couple good singles wins under his belt, because like you said, wins and losses don't mean too much, but when you're not credible as a singles competitor and you're kind of the outskirts of the faction in terms of the actual wrestling aspect of it, a tag team feud isn't going to give you exactly the bump you need.
Yeah, no, I think Bray Wyatt's great, but I think he's a glorified manager at this point until he gets back in the ring, which isn't really a problem, but I hope that day comes sooner rather than later. We also have some MMA fights to announce here. Don Hyung Kim versus Neil Magny is set for UFC 202 at middleweight. We also have Rumble Johnson versus Glover Teixeira. That fight recently got pulled from the Fox card, but has been re-added to the UFC 202 card. Then we have Donald Cowboy Cerrone versus Rick Story. That is also going to be a throwdown fight. We have some Rampage Jackson news. After his poor performance last weekend at the Bellator Dynamite 2 show, he's seeking a fight at heavyweight. After his fight, he said that he was out of shape because he was playing video games and sitting on the couch. But now apparently he's blaming his fighting condition on a thyroid problem that he wasn't previously disclosed. He's never made mention of it before. But for his last contractual fight to Bellator, he's seeking a heavyweight fight against Fedor or Matt Mitrione. It's funny that we call out two people who got blasted last weekend. Even though Mitrione and Fedor won, neither of them look good, and obviously he's seeking an easy fight so he can probably jump back to the UFC after his Bellator contract is up. He never wanted to fight there in the first place. He got dragged back. But he said he didn't have a problem with it because Scott Coker was in charge now instead of Bjorn Rebney. But what are you going to do? That's Rampage. He hasn't been the same for a couple of years, and it's probably really close to the end of his career now. He's been looking slower and slower, and he looked absolutely awful last weekend. He got dominated by a relative no-name for 2 out of 3 rounds. Ugh, that's pretty ridiculous for the once legendary and former UFC champion Quentin Rampage Jackson. Later this week or next week, we will have a Rafael dos Anjos versus Eddie Alvarez fight card breakdown. We're going to break down the whole entire main card, so make sure you don't miss that. And since this is a relatively quick show here today, we have the Raw review. Now, this Raw started out with them pretty much ignoring Roman Reigns. They acknowledged the situation, but they didn't go into detail. Seth Rollins apparently was shooting on the Roman Reigns situation, even though the broadcast team had a video package ready to go up there in the Titantron. So it doesn't make storyline sense there either. So the writers don't pay much attention to anything nowadays. We had 7 matches on this show, and 6 of them were non-finishes or screwy finishes, and one of them was a squash match. The only actual match we had was Sasha Banks and Paige versus Charlotte and Dana Brooke, which, Matt, I know you're looking forward to that feud. What do you think about Raw last night and the non-finishes or screwy finishes?
I mean, you had Enzo and Cass, beating some no-names, and you can't teach that, I guess.
Also, those guys were apparently local baseball prospects that had their names inserted into the they were local independent wrestlers, but they were named after local baseball prospects. So just a little fun fact there. Continue.
But then you had the social outcasts, so it looks like, if not necessarily the most entertaining feud in the terms of actual wrestling talent, pretty entertaining feud in terms of characters at least. As you said, Sasha Banks, I like Sasha Banks. I like the return of Sasha Banks. We actually got to see her in ring this week. We got to see her in action, but we didn't actually get to see her make contact with Charlotte. I think she made contact with Charlotte once or twice during the entire match. The rest of it, she was just beating on Dana Brooke, and anytime Charlotte was the active participant, you had Paige coming in to do any of the damage.
You know what, though? I will say, even though I might not have enjoyed this match, it was the only actual real match on the show that went over 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So, for one, that's saying something. But two, this is the best I've felt about the Divas Revolution since they started it. And it's just a essentially throwaway tag match on Raw. But I think that's great that they can be featured in a match like that now. Unfortunately, they don't have any real storyline going except for, everyone wants to see Sasha Banks come back. Can't talk. But, Dana Brooke's not really impressive. Charlotte's been on a bad roll for a while now since she lost Ric Flair. Paige is virtually unheard of in today's wrestling scene. I mean, she's on Total Divas, and ever since then, she's kind of been not really a factor in the whole Divas division.
And then we turned to the other Divas match, and we had Summer Rae in the ring, who never actually did anything. And there was no actual match because Becky Lynch just came out and punched Natalya, because what we all want is more Natalya, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's definitely something I noticed last night. We have Titus Rusev here that ended in, I think, a count-out.
It did.
We have Rollins Cena with a screwy finish that had John Cena getting pinned after AJ Styles interfered. We had the squash match you talked about. We had the Divas match that was a tag match. We had the other Divas match that didn't even happen. We had Miz versus Kane that ended in a screwy finish with Maurice feigning an injury and then going to the back. I read online, I'm not really sure, I haven't reviewed this yet, but apparently Kane was also down while the referee was making a count, and he never made it to his feet by the 10 count, so this should technically be a draw. Not that it matters anyway, because it's a count out in a title match that Kane shouldn't have got anyway. We had Big Show return on the show, which, you can't really say anything bad about his role because, but that's what he should be doing. He should be doing that charity type of good guy stuff. He shouldn't be going heel and face every week. We had here Cesaro and Cruz versus Del Rio and Sheamus. What can you say about that other than Cesaro's over and Del Rio's getting over? That's about it.
Del Rio's getting over. Like I was saying earlier, we might see the beginning. It could be just League of Nations fallout still, but we could see the beginning of a Del Rio face turn. Maybe. It's really early to say anything, but from the way he exited that match, it may have indicated a turn towards face a little bit. We also had Apollo Crews and Cesaro being on a team is a perfect matchup because both of them great wrestlers but haven't done anything at all.
Then we move on to the Ambrose versus Styles match that main evented the show. Styles is actually coming over as a huge star here, and Ambrose seems to be losing momentum as they go further and further in his heel turn. What do you think about the main event here, other than the fact that it was the same exact finish and predictable finish that Rollins versus Cena had?
Yeah, it was really predictable. You obviously knew that there was no way that AJ Styles was going to come out with a clean win in this match. You knew the club were going to get involved. You knew John Cena was going to get involved. Watching the match itself was pretty good. I liked watching Ambrose and Styles. Both of them are really good in the ring. I enjoyed the match up to the point where we got to where the club comes out, where John Cena comes out, and where everything just kind of falls apart.
Also, after the show went off the air, we had a 4-man tag match with the Shield and the Club and Seth Rollins versus all the top baby faces, excluding Roman Reigns. And the heels lost to send the fans home happy. Everyone hit their finishers. And, that's a dark match, so it's okay to send the heels home with a loss. But this whole show, nothing really happened.
So you kind of glossed over Titus O'Neil a little bit. Do you think he has any kind of U.S. title aspirations at this point? Because he's clearly going for another shot at Battleground.
No. I think if he was going to win, he would have won it with his kids in the front row. And, they could still be going down that line. But I think the Titus O'Neil card is played. I think that was Vince sending him a message. I think he's already hit his peak. If he wasn't suspended, he might even be in a worse place on the card right now. So,
but do you think that maybe they could give him the title to maybe free up Rusev for something else?
No. Rusev just won the title. He's a monster. He just became a monster again. Unless they have plans to push Titus into the main event scene, which I don't see right now. I just don't see Titus winning. I think last month was his shot. And I think he has potential. But I think maybe Bob Backlund needs to make Titus O'Neil great again. We had Xavier Woods seemingly brainwashed by Bray Wyatt, and he really stood out on the show. Do you think this is leading to a New Day breakup for the draft?
I think it's at least leading to Xavier Woods leaving the New Day. They could keep Kofi Kingston and Big E together because we've seen Kofi Kingston on his own doesn't necessarily get over it all. People don't hate him, but people don't necessarily like him. He's kind of just a there kind of guy. So I think that he may stay with Big E, whether they remain faces, whether they turn heel. But I think it definitely seems to be indicating that Xavier Woods might be being extracted from the New Day.
I think so too, and I really hate to see it because when the original draft split happened, there was a lot of tag teams that were super over that didn't need to be split up, that WWE split up, like Bubba and Devon. And I feel like that's where the New Day is. I feel like for the first time I can look forward to them coming out. I know their catchphrases and stuff, but they change them enough where every week it's still enjoyable. And I think they have another couple years they could have got out of them. I really hope this is just going to bring out a serious side in them. But that wouldn't make booking sense either because the Wyatts just returned and they need a huge win to get themselves over. So I really don't see where they can go with this to have a positive benefit for the New Day. So yeah, I really do think they're headed towards breaking up, and hopefully that leads to good singles pushes for the wrestlers. But, as history shows, that's not really the case unless you're Edge or Jeff Hardy.
But I mean, in the same way that Bray Wyatt has been kind of the manager for the Wyatt family almost for the recent history, Xavier Woods has kind of been the manager for the New Day. So, I mean, he wrestles here and there, but he's never the difference maker in a match. He's never necessarily doing anything overly memorable. So I think if anybody is to be taken away from the New Day, I think it's good that it's Xavier Woods because I feel like the New Day can still remain intact and build something off of Big E and Kofi Kingston as opposed to either of them and Xavier Woods if one or the other were to leave.
I think they could too, but another thing you have to take into account is how much work does Xavier Woods do behind the scenes compared to, maybe not Big E, but compared to Kofi, because it seems like Big E is the charisma guy. It seems like he's the one who knows where things are going. He's the one on social media. I mean, Big E's had a coming out party on social media. He's hilarious. But Kofi doesn't really do too much on social media. Kofi's a good guy, and he's hilarious. But I think without Xavier Woods, I think that group's falls. I don't see them staying together, and I think they need a mouthpiece. At least I think they need something to overhaul their act, because a big part of their act is no matter who's in the ring, someone's out there playing Francesca too, getting the crowd going. And without that, I don't know if New Day has the same staying power.
I mean, I don't disagree, but as you just said, Big E has a lot of charisma. Kofi kind of struggles with that a little bit, but Kofi's always been really, really above average in the ring. He's not great, but he's definitely above average in the ring. He's entertaining to watch wrestle. He's not putting on boring matches usually. So I think that Big E could be the mouthpiece to a Big E and Kofi Kingston, with Kofi Kingston kind of just being there for ring work. And as you said, when Kofi Kingston does happen to talk, he is funny. People are laughing. He's memorable. So I think they could manage with a Big E and Kofi Kingston because of the charisma that oozes out of Big E.
You know, talking about that, I miss the days where tag teams would split up and they wouldn't have a heel or face turn. They would just split up and then tag together whenever they needed it. Not like a Shield thing, because those guys largely went their own way. But I think that would be cool, like a Stevie Ray Booker T kind of thing, where they could always team up if they needed to. But you know what I mean? Like, they're all on the same page and they're all always face or always heel. But they can work together if they need to. I think they need to reintroduce that a little bit.
In this situation, though, I feel like that just leads to Kofi Kingston falling into a jobber role for the most part.
Maybe, but he could also, I don't know. I think Kofi has some heel potential. If they gave him the mic and they had him go out there. The problem I think I have with him is, like, his lines came off great last night. The only thing that came off bad was when he said, like, it's not a whatever, it's a lifestyle. About the power of positivity. It's a lifestyle. Like, yeah, that made me believe you. You know what I mean? Like, everything you said up until there killed me. So I think you're right. I do think Kofi sinks, but I think he could do better on his own than Xavier Woods could do.
I agree, but I mean, if we look at Kofi Kingston's record, I've always liked Kofi Kingston. I've always thought Kofi Kingston had a lot of potential. I've always thought that the WWE kind of didn't give Kofi Kingston enough of a chance to make his own name for himself. And I like to see Kofi Kingston in the New Day now, because he's kind of, even though it's in a tag team, he's kind of getting the spotlight a little bit. And I feel like, again, he has the potential if he was a singles competitor, but I don't know that WWE will necessarily utilize that potential as they haven't for however many years he's been on the roster.
For anybody on the roster.
For so many other people on the roster, exactly.
Other than that, I think that was the extent of storylines progressing on this show. I don't think anything else really happened. We ended up with the triple threat match again that was announced last week to close the show. The Titus Rusev thing gets hurried along, but, you know, nothing too crazy going on there.
Any ideas on where Miz is going with the Intercontinental title? Obviously, I hope we're not going to see any more matches with Kane.
We probably will in the short term, because that's just how they like to do it. But title-wise, I think there's 3 or 4 mid-card guys they're not really doing anything with right now. I think they might stick like Cesaro and Del Rio if they're not going to have an actual feud themselves, maybe in that match, because Miz is entertaining with Maurice, but he definitely needs somebody to feud with. And this would be the perfect spot for a lot of those NXT guys that aren't doing anything right now, like Austin Aries, to beat the shit out of the Miz every week,
Yeah.
To give the hardcore fans something to cheer about. But
and it is curious that they put the Intercontinental belt on Miz as he's shooting a movie, but WWE can do as they please with that.
Yeah, that title's an afterthought. That's what they do. They make titles important for 3 or 4 weeks and then they drop them. So, got to see where that one goes. But that's it for this week. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back in a few days when more news breaks, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
So if you like what you heard here today, subscribe, comment if you have something to say below, and we'll be back later this week with more news, maybe a SmackDown review. So keep listening.
Yeah, if there's any shows you want to hear us review, let us know. We'll do whatever. And thanks for listening. See you guys next week. Bye.